Well, hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Ultimate Wellness Group Transformation Tuesday. Got a wonderful show for you today. We are continuing our show that is specifically for the sisters, the women, the ladies, because we have a lot left to discuss. So today is part two of Women's Preventive Health. Got a special guest for you today, not telling you who that is until just a few minutes. So stay tuned and make sure you ask a few people that you know to tune in, especially young girls, because we really need to improve our information and how we have these so-called taboo conversations. Our young women, our young girls need to hear this. So in the name of Allah, the beneficent, the most merciful, I bear witness there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is his messenger. I further bear witness that Master Father Muhammad came in the person of Allah and taught one from among us, that being the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who gave us that wonderful book there, How to Eat to Live, which is the foundation of everything that you will hear on this show. And of course, in a time that we are living in with so much evil, so much murder, so much debauchery, so much confusion, we were left with a man that has given us guidance, continues to give us great guidance. And I'm speaking none other than Minister Louis Farrakhan. In their names, I greet you in the words of peace of Assalamu alaikum. So thank you all for coming and again, spending some of your Tuesday evening with us for our wonderful women's show again. I hope you brothers aren't upset that we had two shows for the sisters. They deserve a little more information. Brothers, they've been working hard. And mostly the reason why we had to do two shows is because, you know, the woman in the medical field is being attacked, I would say, probably in more ways than men. Men are being attacked, but I believe women's systems are being attacked more. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, and that's why we had two shows. Just a couple of notes that I want to take care of from the past shows, and of course, something that I told somebody I would answer. So I'm going to do that real quick, and we're going to get right into the subject. So the first point that I want to make is that during the autoimmune mucus and inflammation program, I didn't go into the fact that a lot of autoimmune disorders are being linked to vaccines. And I wanted to make that point because if you look at diseases like, and I shouldn't say disease, I should say problems like autism, mental retardation, and of course these days people don't like to use those terms like learning delay or learning problems, you know, however we want to say things politically correct. Can't say that I'm always politically correct, but I don't have any intention on offending anybody. So the point is that mental health problems, mental learning capabilities, autism and other things, as well as the autoimmune disorders, have completely skyrocketed and astronomically increased, exponentially increased since this country has gone to a lot of processed foods and vaccines. And you can do this research on your own. You can look at the increase in autism, and it increases along with the schedule of immunizations. And if you look at cancer and autoimmune disorders and, you know, other problems, you see an increase in that goes along with immunizations and the bad food, the things that we call food that shouldn't be called food that we eat on a regular basis. So I wanted to mention that because I missed that point when I did that program. And when I went back and listened to it, I felt like that needed to be added to be complete in us coming to conclusions on why there are so many autoimmune disorders amongst today's young, middle-aged, and old. Most of us probably know somebody with an autoimmune disorder, and we can just go back 20 and 30 years and it was not as prevalent. And so just another reason for us to get on our motivated program of doing what is going to keep our health good long time in the future. The second thing that I wanted to address, I had two people ask me about circumcisions in boys. And yes, today is a woman's show, but I'm going to answer that real quick because it's been a couple of weeks and I haven't answered it. So I will say that from a spiritual perspective, I am not qualified to answer that question. I would just put that out there. We'd have to get that type of an answer from somebody else. But from a medical perspective, there is no reason to circumcise your son. I didn't allow my son to get circumcised because my personal experience when I went through my pediatric rotations, I did some circumcisions. And, you know, from a perspective of going through that training before I was in the Nation of Islam, before I had any experience with Dianetics in the Church of Scientology, I really didn't think about the harm that is being done. But it's a very barbaric treatment. You put a little metal tube over the end of the boy's penis, which goes underneath the skin, and then you cut the skin from around that metal tube. But the child is crying, and not just crying, but I mean wailing and trying to get out of the restraints. We usually have them in restraints, so their arms are tied down, their legs are tied down. I mean, to me, it's just a barbaric treatment. I don't see why it is necessary at all from a physical perspective, because I taught my son how to pull the skin back and clean himself well under there. And, you know, he's 16 years old now, so he probably doesn't want me to look now, but I believe he does a good job of taking care of his hygiene. You know, mostly that is the reason that most physicians use, because there is no truth to the fact that if you're not circumcised, you have an increased chance of infections. That's not true. There is no truth to the fact that if you're not circumcised, you have an increased chance of penis cancer. That is true. That is not true. None of that has been ever scientifically supported. Those are myths or ideas that people came up with. I don't know where they came from. But again, my medical advice is that if that's what you decide to do, then get it done. But there are no medical reasons that would make you think, from my experience and my research, that it's necessary to circumcise your child. So I pray that I answered the two brothers that asked that question. I know, Brother Dwayne, you are definitely interested in that because you have a young man that's coming in your life soon. So I pray that I gave you the medical side of it. That's as far as I can go, because as I said, I think we'd have to get the spiritual answer for somebody else. I wouldn't even try to qualify myself to get that type of answer because I don't have the ability. Okay, so let's check out some of these shout outs and then we'll get into our special guest for today. Y'all in for a treat. Maxine Bland, a typical soldier, coming in early. Daisy Muhammad, Geisha Smith, hi. April Muhammad, Drew Janine, Dora Muhammad, Kimberly Harris, Karen Muhammad, Tyrone Muhammad, Roxanne X, Lisa Bird, Cheryl X, Linda Muhammad, Marcia Moore, D. Kiki, Eunice Johnson, Kalila Muhammad, James Williams, Leanne Waters, Denise Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum to all of you. Thank you for coming on the show. Appreciate you. If this is your first time, or if it's you're a regular supporter or a regular soldier that comes back and hangs out with us every week, I appreciate you. Danny Muhammad, I see you too. Quick question. Maxine says, any concerns for those who have been circumcised in the past? No, I really don't have any concerns with any boys that have been circumcised, because, you know, once it's done, the skin is out of the way and you don't have to worry about pulling it back and cleaning it and all those type of things. But the only concern that I would have would be that it's associated with an engram. So, you know, if a person is worried about a child's superior mental health, then that may be something that would have to be run in a session. And for those that don't know what I'm talking about going to the Church of Scientology and using some of the technology that they use called Dianetics auditing, where we can remove things out of our mind that have a tendency to hold on to some of our energy and keep us subdued from being able to be our complete and total self and have our total energy in the direction that we want it. It's a beautiful tool. We were, of course, instructed by Minister Louis Farrakhan to go and do some things with them so that we could be more efficient and more effective in the things that we have been given a gift and a talent for. And so I wouldn't be concerned about it for anything, Maxine Bland, other than that perspective. Okay, so I hope I answered your question. Danny Muhammad says, what should a man do to support, help his spouse after hysterectomy? Excellent question. You're getting the questions going good before we can get started, Brother Danny, but we're going to get to that. Our special guest and I are going to deal with all of those situations in just a second. So a few more shout outs and we're going to get started. Darlene Muhammad T. Farrow, Leanne Waters, I think, Enrico X, James Williams, Nija Alana. I hope I said your name correctly. Please see Sister Fudia Muhammad's book, How to Give Birth to a God, Science of Childbirth, where she uses the minister's words on pro-circumcision. Well, there you go. I have that book and I'm in the process of reading it. I haven't finished it yet, but we are going to have that conversation at another time because she just gave us the answer. Okay. James Williams, Mariam Muhammad, what's going on, daughter? Ann Taylor. Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate you. So without any further delay, let me bring in our special guest waiting patiently. For everybody that doesn't know this is Sister Allison Muhammad, and I'm going to let her do a short, well, not short, whatever she feels introduction so that you all can understand why she's on the show, why she is absolutely qualified to be on the show. And then we're going to get right into this wonderful comment. Sister Allison, how are you? And come on in, my sister.
I am amazing. Praise be to Allah. Thank you so much, first of all, Dr. Keeley, for even inviting me. And, you know, any doctor, I really love when they are willing to step up and really stand in the gap and really speak truth to women that are willing to go past what they've learned in medical school and knowing that there's so much more to a woman than what you learned in a book. That's right. I really appreciate and honor you for taking this time and having me on the show. As he said, my name is Allison Muhammad. I am a spiritual empowerment coach and a womb care practitioner. Now, what that means for anyone who's not familiar with that is I help women maintain womb health. So, and even those who are having problems with womb health, we take the opportunity to really look at her spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically, and then we get to the bottom of what her issues really are about. And then from a holistic approach, give her solutions on how to really come in tune with her body and take control of her body and get back in her rhythm and flow until she reaches that health. Now, I am not a doctor, not a medical physician at all. There are some cases that I will not take on that have gone a little bit past my expertise. So, but I tell women I deal mostly with preventive, and I will help women who have had hysterectomies, who have had fibroids, cysts, in that nature, because you still can be helped. I do recommend, even when you see a doctor, that you find a womb care practitioner and go over those types of things and have two doctors, and then together go through what are your best options as far as your health care is concerned, specifically your womb care.
Yes, ma'am. How long have you been doing it, did you say?
Oh, wow. Womb care, about 10 years. Spiritual empowerment coach, professionally, I guess about 20 years.
So there you all see. I keep trying to tell you all that when we have people come on the Ultimate Wellness Group Transformation Tuesday, we don't have any lightweight people. You know what I mean? I don't consider myself a lightweight person because I study and I try to be a type of person that can bring you truth. And so you see that we have another giant among us this evening. So one of the things that Sister Allison and I wanted to discuss with you all today is we have about 4 subjects, but we want to talk about some things that are in conjunction with what we discussed last week, or what I should say, what I discussed last week. But it is important for us to be able to see this from more than one perspective, as she said. And the first thing that we want to do is talk about staying in control. And I know you all have heard me talk about staying in control on multiple times. So I'm going to give it right back over to Sister Allison. Let her go into that, and then I'm going to follow up, and then we're going to go into our next subject. So, Sister, go ahead.
Well,
How important is it?
When you look at the body, I mean, just you as a doctor know just the fascination of how well made it is.
That's right.
Better than any computer or machinery out there. So, but when the body is out of order, just like any high grade machinery, it has sensors. It will let you know, hey, your battery is low, you need more fluid here. But guess who's the first person to know that? You are. You're the first person that knows what's going on with your body. A lot of times we don't trust what the sensors are telling us. I always use the example. Now, let me say this. I've worked and done internships with internal medicine doctors, GYN, OBGYN doctors, and holistic health doctors. And I'll tell you, I've seen people who come into the holistic health doctor with reports saying that they have breast cancer, right? And then they come to the holistic health doctor. He does a series of tests, and he's like, no, that's mucus in your breast. Like, what?
Right.
So think about a person, and this person was scheduled to have this taken out of their breast, like major surgery. But she knew she kept saying, you know what? That's not what I'm feeling. That's not what my body is telling me. Let me get a second opinion. And thank God she did, because when she came in, simply the doctor put her on a detox, gave her something to dry up what was going on in her breast. And then I worked with her on the spiritual and emotional side on why the body was coming up with this type of thing, presenting itself as disease. Another thing I want to mention, Dr. Keeley, is a lot of times we have fear. Fear is what makes us give our control over to someone else. So I want to take away this word disease. If you could give it another name, whatever name the doctors give you, as far as it's cancer, it's this, it's that, that. It's a dis-ease of the body. The body is having a hard time. It's alerting you that, hey, something is wrong. Something is out of order. And you just got to figure out how to put it back into order. So the first thing on taking control of your health is really taking away the fear factor. There's something going on. The body wonderfully made will say, hey, this is something going on. That's the sensor that you handle what's going on.
So you all see, I mean, I didn't prepare her statements. She's speaking from her heart and her experience. And you all have heard me say that all the time. You know, these diagnoses that these doctors give us usually are associated with a large fear factor. And we don't take back that control. You have to take control before you go to the doctor and stay in control. And so that's just another example. You know, you actually brought up a remembrance for me, Sister Allison. I met a lady about 4 years ago who had both of her breasts removed because she supposedly had cancer. She went through chemotherapy and radiation. And when the pathology report came back of her breast, it wasn't cancer. So this woman went through all of that. Horrific. I mean, can any of you imagine, men, you are 40 years old or 50 years old and somebody takes your penis and your testicles off or cuts your butt cheeks off? I'm not being funny. I'm being serious. This woman was 40 something years old, had both of her breasts removed. Can you even imagine what it's like to look in the mirror from this point forward? And then they made a mistake. And this is not something that happens occasionally. This is the most common death amongst medical centers and surgeries and big hospitals. It is the death that comes because of the mistake of the doctor or the rushing of the medical system and rushing you through these systems. And so that's why I believe that these type of programs are so important, because the more information, the more knowledge you have, the less you'll make a decision off of fear or false information. You need to be sure when you go and have these type of situations happen to you, or even to get the idea that you're going to allow somebody to think and put you in that box. So very important, sister. I'm glad you mentioned that. So we got a couple of comments. Ada Cottingham, wa alaikum salam. Cheryl Brown, you said early menopause. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. Darlene Muhammad says, what are the health effects after having a hysterectomy? We're going to talk about that. How do we get back in tune with our womb health after chemo and the removal of an ovary? Excellent question. We're going to deal with all of that. All right. So all of you that are concerned about the womb health, we're about to get into that right now. What I'm going to do is give it back to Sister Allison, let her open up, and I'm going to show just a basic anatomy of a woman's womb so we can make sure we have the terminology correct. What is a partial hysterectomy? What is a total hysterectomy? What is an oophorectomy? What's the cervix? So we're going to go into all of that, make sure that you all are educated and you are able to make good decisions. And then I think Allison and I would both agree 1,000%. The real purpose of this show, primarily, we're going to go into other subjects, but as far as the uterus is concerned and a woman's ovaries, is that we have to get to a point where we understand as Black people and Black women, especially, that it doesn't make a difference if you think that you don't want to have children anymore. Your uterus should not be removed from your body.
Right.
Go ahead and take that and speak while I bring up that picture, Sister Allison.
Well, I want to deal with the womb on two aspects. I'll deal with it physically, and then we'll talk a little bit about it spiritually as well.
Yes.
One of the reasons why I love working with young people, because of education, being allowed to give them information. A lot of us have misconceptions about the womb. So as a woman, for most of us, we were not taught anything about the womb. When a woman first, or a young girl first has her cycle, that is the first introduction to the womb.
That's right.
And there's no conversation other than, okay, this is how you handle it. You're bleeding. Okay, here are some pads. And then they just kind of send you on your way. Nobody taught us as women that this is a whole chemically balanced structure that depends on not only what's coming in from the outside, but what's going on in the inside with my mind, what's in my heart, what is my environment like. So I remember when I had my first child, 20 years old, my poor body was like, oh, okay, this is a lot.
Yes.
And I remember telling the OB, this is what we're going to do. When I have this baby, let's just go ahead and tie my tubes. Let's just be done with this. And I'm so grateful. I had a very good OB/GYN. As a matter of fact, I'm from Mississippi. I don't think I mentioned that. And my OB went to school with my aunt. So, of course, he was not having it. He was like, no, I'm not doing that. We are not tying your tubes. You're going to have to think about something else.
Right.
But back in those days, you actually could tell a doctor, hey, do this, and they would absolutely do it.
Yes.
But it was lack of information. I didn't know just how valuable my womb was, and how tying my tubes would have been a very terrible mistake, as I have 4 children. today.
Yes.
So when you look at uh, the womb, okay, and when I say womb, I do mean the whole thing. I mean the vagina, the uterus, and the ovaries, the entire reproductive system. So if you do you have a, and then of course you have the cervix, which is right there as you go up the vagina leading into the uterus. Do you have a side view, Dr. Keeley? So
Yes.
as I talk about the importance of the womb is a part of an integrative system. And this is what I have the hardest time sometimes getting women to understand and getting young girls to understand. It is there, the space that you have in the womb. And when he pulls up the picture, I'll be able to show you. But the womb sits in the middle of a woman's body. So it is tied to that which is above it. You have the bladder that's kind of right in front of it, and then you have the rectum and the colon that is behind it. So when you take away the womb on the physical aspects, what happens is the bladder shifts and then the colon shifts because something was holding it all together before. And now, of course, when you take it out, all of that shifts. That's not what happens. So your whole body has to adjust to a part of it coming out. So as you see the picture here, you see the bladder that sits right in front of the uterus. And then, of course, right behind it, you have the rectum. Now, once you have the rectum to fall because the uterus either comes out or the uterus is prolapsed or is tilted or shifted in any particular way, of course, that interferes with bowel function. A woman could have constipation depending on the position of the uterus and also sit on that tailbone. And I know in that picture it doesn't show the tailbone, but it actually affects the tailbone where it could shift and you have low back problems. So it's not just an extra organ that's sitting there that if you take it out, it will not be affected. Did you want to add something, Dr. Keeley, before I went to the spiritual aspect?
Yeah, from a physical perspective, I just wanted to bear witness to what you are saying. I mentioned last week that I have had some women, multiple women in my career that have said, they couldn't exactly describe it, but they were never the same. I think that's spiritual and physical. But as Sister Allison said, if you look at the pictures, the ones that are up there now, you can see how all of the organs are related. But the thing that I always want to point out to people is none of these spaces in between these organs are realistic from a perspective of what we see when we go in. Everything in the human body is perfectly set with each other. So it'd be very similar to the example that I used not too long ago when I was talking about somebody's car. Nobody would let me come to their car and say, hey, I think I'm going to take your turbocharger out, or I'm going to move your gas tank from where it is, and I'm going to put that in another part of your body. Your car is just not running well enough, so I'm going to go ahead and take your fuel pump out. Nobody thinks that makes sense when it comes to your car. So how could it make sense when it comes to your body? All of these organs are made to work in the places that they're put, and everything that's around them and everything that's supporting them is part of the functioning to make everything work correctly. So, in some of these pictures that we're showing, of course, they're showing a bladder and they're showing a uterus right behind there and a rectum behind there. But in between all of those organs are tissues that hold things together. They're muscles that make certain things move. In one of the pictures, I don't know if you all saw it, but it said pelvic floor. The pelvic floor is a bunch of muscles that are at the bottom of a woman's vagina and rectum and bladder. All of those work in conjunction with each other. So when somebody decides to go in there and starts taking things out, physically, things will never be the same. And usually there are undescribable ways that women say, I don't know, I can't describe it exactly, but I know something's not right. So that's all I wanted to add, sister. Go ahead.
Okay. So when you look at the spiritual aspect of the womb and a doctor just taking it out, and don't get, I mean, disheartened or, give up and think that there's no
Right.
hope if you've already had a hysterectomy, because we'll deal with that a little bit later in the show. But you have this womb. I've had clients that have come in and the womb is toward the back, or the womb is laying over to the left or laying over to the right or going forward. I can tell a woman's history without her even telling me about it based on the position of the womb. So, how do I do that? One, because of my other gifts as a spiritual empowerment coach and just reading the energy of the womb. So, you'll have women who have been abused or molested, and depending on how that experience was, and what I mean how it was it brutal, was it very forceful, the womb will be kind of retreated toward the back, and then I would have to position the womb in another position or laying over to the left. Those are normally for women who are in sad relationships, who have what I call dreams deferred. They didn't be what they wanted to be in life, or a failed relationship, or not having a good relationship with the parent. Those are some of the spiritual aspects, the emotional aspects that makes the womb shift into different position, or even the prolapse womb. You have a woman that's kind of given up on life. She's like, okay, whatever. And this is also in her relationships. So the reason why I took the time to describe that is, if you understand that it's not just physical and that it's emotionally and spiritual, then you understand that you can do something about that. You don't have to go and have a doctor to take it out, because what you're dealing with are symptoms. Those are symptoms of something
Yes.
else. They're not the main thing. So if I can just get people to understand that it's a symptom, fibroids is a symptom of something else. A cyst is a symptom of something else. So we have to deal with the root causes of what's really going on with the woman, looking at her totality, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically. Address all of those things before you even get to the part of, let's just take it out.
Right.
So those are some of the spiritual aspects, and really put you back in control of what's going on with your body and how you handle these different situations.
Yes, ma'am. So let me get to a couple of these questions. We got some good questions coming in. And the first thing that I want to do is give a little shout out to some of my students. Brothers and sisters, I got some sisters that are part of my the Ultimate Wellness Group. They call themselves the Ultimate Wellness Group Brigade. A couple of them have started a Navy bean soup business, but some of them just come and we learn together, and they are part of some of my visits with some of my patients. Mariam Muhammad. Who else is on here? I saw Naja Muhammad and Sania Muhammad. These are all of my future doctors that are going to take what I'm doing and go to a whole nother level. And so when if any of you know any young men, I need some young men. I got plenty of young sisters, but we got to get some of these young brothers up in here, okay? So we got a couple questions. Let's take a couple questions, Sister Allison. Darlene Muhammad says, is having high blood pressure and cholesterol a result of surgery, or not having a womb, or medicines given at hospital, or rapid weight gain? There's a lot to that question.
Yeah, it is. Well, the womb aspect of it is, and Dr. Akili can go into it more on a doctor side or a medicine side. But think about, you look at that pituitary gland and just the whole endocrine system, the reproductive system is governed a lot by that endocrine system and the hormones that it releases. So the womb has everything to do with that. When it's out of balance in any way, and a lot of women don't know this as well, a tilted womb or prolapsed womb sometimes will throw the hormones off because it's not in its proper position. So that is, and as any woman who has gone through menopause or is going through menopause, she will tell you the womb is just not the womb. Once it starts to go off balance, it will send the whole system out of balance. So that's my answer to that.
Yeah, sister, I'm not necessarily sure. I would say that high blood pressure or cholesterol is directly related to the womb. But again, the whole body works together. It is a system. We can't take something out of this body and expect the system to work together. So, I would expect that having any type of surgery, taking any type of organ out the body, but specifically we're talking about the uterus, there's going to be some effect. But let me say it like this. If a person is eating correctly and they're spiritually intact and they're drinking enough water and doing all the things like the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us to do to take care of this body correctly, and they get a hysterectomy, I don't believe they're going to get high blood pressure or cholesterol problems, but there will be something that won't be right. There will be something that will be out of balance in our body. And a lot of times it's individual things for individual people. But, I wouldn't say that it would be tied to any particular disease process, at least in my experience. So, Brother Danny's question, I'm trying to remember what he said. What should a man do to help his spouse after hysterectomy? That's a pretty good question. Go ahead, take that one, sister.
Mm-hmm. Whatever she is requiring of you. I posted something the other day. No, and I really do mean that. I'm being facetious, but I really do mean that. One thing, the beautiful part about a woman is none of us are the same. That's the most beautiful part about a woman. So there's no cookie cutter method that you can use for all of us. And I use the example of a beautiful garden with different varieties of, flowers in it. You can have all of these flowers in the same flower bed, and they all require something different. Some need more sunlight, some need more shade, some need more rain, some need you to talk to them a lot in order for them to grow. So it's whatever is required of her. One thing that I wanted to mention as well, Dr. Keelan, when we were dealing with the spiritual aspect of it, and this is for the brother in his question as well, you have to remember, so we're taught that Allah created himself out of triple darkness. And we're also told that the only thing that duplicates that space in which he created himself out of is the womb of the woman.
Right.
And he talks about the secret to his own creation, and creation is actually inside of the woman.
That's right.
The woman has her own special harmonized rotation with the God himself. Every woman has that. Every person has that. But the woman has something very significant and very close as it relates to God. And just like the planets rotate around the sun, each individual woman has her own rotation around the God. So when we talk about spiritual health and the health of the womb, it's hard to have that without that divine connection. And that's where I was going with the pituitary gland. They call it the master gland. A little pea-sized something that is supposed to regulate the rest of the glands of the endocrine system. Something that small interacts with so many other things, right? Same thing with the connection of God. Every woman either has when you have your cycle, you said 28-day cycle or 26-day cycle, that tends to be the norm. But within that flow is a certain rhythm of her body. And the divine wisdom of God keeps that harmony and that flow going. So I also wanted to offer that with our sisters, because you can't talk about good womb health and care without considering the person who created it in the first place, and consider that unseen thing that holds you in rotation with him. It also holds that rotation in that timing. So it talks about the timing of the endocrine system and the hormones. That timing is what holds you in good womb care. I just wanted to add that as we were talking earlier about spiritual health.
Absolutely. And if I may add, just my experience, brothers, I'm going to speak just to you for a few minutes. We really have to start to raise ourselves up in our view of the woman. In the Nation of Islam, we have a couple of mantras, right? A nation can rise no higher than its woman. Another one is, if you teach a man, you teach a person, you teach a woman, you teach a nation.
Yes.
But in essence, our view of the woman is so degraded because we have taken on the perspective of the master in the slave master perspective. We didn't look at our woman as the spiritual being that she is. Now, why did I say that? Because Brother Danny's question is really good, and this is not aimed towards him because of asking the question, but it's aimed at the men that I have had experiences with over my experience in practicing medicine. A lot of men look so much at their women as this physical thing that he wants to take use of whenever he gets ready to. And I've had many, many women over the years, and I've had conversations with many men who were so eager to have sex with their wife after she had a C-section or after she's delivered birth. That's not necessarily the best thing to do. You should have more consideration of that woman and what she just finished going through. And so, the spiritual aspect that Sister Allison is discussing is what we as men have to learn to take our thought process of the woman higher. I remember as a young man, even, going through college and medical school, I used to always say, man, I love the black woman. The black woman is the best. Protect the black woman. Don't let nobody disrespect her. But my everyday actions were disrespectful to black women. And it was Minister Louis Farrakhan that taught me, in listening to many of his lectures, how to raise my thought process and to raise my adoration of the woman. And that increased my respect. And so I think that is something that we as black men in general have to do. When a woman goes through something like a hysterectomy, we have to understand the magnitude of what she just lost. And that's why I used the example earlier. How interested would you be in having sex with your wife if somebody took off your testicles? You had surgery for whatever reason and you don't have testicles anymore. It might be a while before you were interested in having sexual relations, because it just would be something that you have to adjust to, get used to, and heal from. So maybe we should take that same consideration when our wives go through some of the things that they're going through. And when they really get down to it, the type of treatments that are happening to women when it comes to a hysterectomy, when it comes to mastectomies, those are thought processes that more than likely came out of men. They're very barbaric. They are not spiritual. They are not kind. They're not considerate. They're completely barbaric. And now after the surgery, you have to go on your own way and find, I'm speaking specifically now of women, you have to find your own way of finding a doctor that will find some place where you take certain maybe muscles or fat from other parts of the body to give you what may look like a breast, to give you some sense of mental health back with what you lost. But it's just a barbaric reality to go through. And so it's definitely something. I think the question was excellent, because we do have to know how to take care of our women when they go through things like this. But let's raise our standard, brothers. Another
Thank you.
question.
Let me add to that,
Yes,
Dr.
ma'am.
Keith. Thank you so much for sharing that. The Holy Quran talks about sending something good beforehand.
Yes.
And I'll add to my brother is, whenever you have a woman that loves God or has any type of relationship with God, if you stroke what they call the pineal gland, from your words, from your energy, from your beingness around her. A woman is like a flower. She will open up like a flower and will guide you into what they call the inner sanctuary of her mind and in her heart. So that's so very important what you were saying and how men can do so much as it relates to the overall health of a woman just by keeping the environment as such that she can thrive and she can grow. She's just going to be better for you. So I
Absolutely.
appreciate that comment. Yes, sir.
Praise to Allah. So everybody, if you think the show is worthwhile, you think you're getting some good information, please share the show. Please share the show and try to get a few young women to come on in and ask some of their questions. So Ada Cottingham says, how do we get back in tune with our womb health after chemo and the removal of an ovary? I think that's a very good question.
Uh,
And let me add this while you're on that. Go ahead and add Maxine Bland. She says, "How do we clean our womb and begin the process?" I think those are good to go together.
Okay. So, what I usually do is work with women on first, we get to the source of what's really going on. So, cancer usually is anger. And so, even though a person has already had chemotherapy or even had the womb or ovaries removed, we still have to deal with what happened. Like what is really going on here that the body created this thing such as cancer. So we go really deep into removing and releasing that trauma. We do womb journaling, which is really important.
Yes.
Uh, Really, because as I mentioned earlier in the show, most of us don't deal with the womb at all unless we're pregnant or unless we're having a cycle. I teach women how to interact with their womb every single day. You need to be in communication with your womb every single day. You make that connection, and then the womb starts to change. Then you start to heal. It helps you deal with the trauma of what happened that caused you to have chemo in the first place. Let me take the time to do this because I don't want anybody to think like this is, spooky or anything like that. Every cell in our body vibrates. It has a vibration. It actually creates an energy field around the body itself.
That's right.
But what is inside of the cell is information. Information is actually vibrating and is sharing that with the entire body. So when you address the cell itself, when you deal with the emotions that is making it cause this tumor, is making it grow, this fibroid, this cyst, because of the information that it has inside of the cell. So when I say we deal with the healing aspect, we go in spiritually, we deal with the emotions of it, and then we send that energy of healing and goodness, then the cells vibrate something totally different and takes that to the rest of the body. So I wanted to take the time to explain that so, nobody would think we're talking about woo-woo spooky stuff here.
No, I mean, I pray that nobody is thinking that way because there is no disconnect with the spiritual and this human body and the way it works. Look at the way some people get bad news. You have I know somebody personally that lost a son and then not too long after lost another son. Actually, now that I think about it, I'm thinking about two different women, and both of them have never been the same. They have never had the same energy level, never the same interactive capability with other people. It doesn't seem like they have the same capability to love. That things can destroy us from a perspective of just our spirit. And I would just like to mention on both of those questions, cleansing the womb, in my experience and my study, has to be considered the process that already is innate in you. Your monthly cycle is all the cleaning that's needed. Mm-hmm. So and I'm talking about not just like Sister Allison mentioned earlier, talking about the womb from the perspective of looking at it completely. But I am talking about the womb specifically here. If you all can see my little scroll there, but here the cervix opens up into the uterus. This is where typically the baby will grow. And then you have your, of course, fallopian tubes here and your ovaries, right? So when we talk about a woman having like Sister Allison mentioned earlier, she wanted to get her tubes tied. When you get your tubes tied, they are tying off using something either to cut this or, there was a time where they would just put a string around it, tie it on one and another, and what's in between there would die because it got no blood flow. And then the reason why they do that is because there's no egg that can get into this area. The sperm can't get to the egg. But the point that I'm mentioning here is that your uterus is made of 3 layers. You have your outside, which is the periosteum, you have the endometrium, and then you have the myometrium and then the endometrium. So your endometrium, that whole layer that gets thick, it thickens during the month as your estrogen is rising. And then when progesterone overtakes your estrogen, that's when the blood flow and all the nutrients stops going to that layer, and then it dies and it comes out. So the cleansing is happening automatically. It's automatically happening up in here. And the other thing that I always like to mention is if you look down here in the vagina, when women, because I've had a lot of women come to me and I had to dispel this myth. They think when they do a douche that they're actually cleaning the uterus, and that's just not happening. The cervix is the protection of anything getting into the uterus. So when you do a douche, you're doing that inside the vagina. You never go up into the womb. The uterus, which is the actual womb, the whole system is the womb. But when we talk about the womb specifically where the baby grows, we're talking about this uterus right here that grows with the baby, and that muscle protects that baby. That's not being cleaned when you use a douche. The douche is going right in here, and this area up in here is not affected, and nothing can get past that. So I just wanted to mention that. So, when we're talking about chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, and or having your monthly cycle, the most important thing to do is, as Sister Allison said, get your mind in a good place, a healing place, and think about the things that we talk about every week, all the subjects that I've talked about, and the optimal vegetarianism and the science of eating. When you put those 2 things together, that spiritual health with that physical health, your body will make that recovery. And also, as Sister Allison said earlier, don't beat yourself up if you've had surgery. Don't concern yourself with whatever you have had in the past that you can't do anything about. You can start today and keep moving forward and do the best you can to improve your health to be the best that it can. We can't do anything about the past other than learn from it and maybe use your story to help some other people not have to go through it. But I always try to stress that typically when I talk, I'm talking about putting the bar way high so that we all can achieve to something. But if you've had some type of detrimental thing happen to you, if you've made a bad decision in the past, and a lot of times it's not a bad decision, you made a decision based on somebody that gave you the advice, right, and they were supposed to be in the right position, and they gave you the money idea, and you had to suffer from it. Well, just keep living your life. They're going to get theirs. You believe that. The universe will get them back. The spiritual aspect is not going to allow those type of decisions that were based on money, and you were the abject of that money scheme. It's not just going to go like that. So,
Dr. Keeley, can I?
Yes,
I
ma'am.
want to add something to that. So sometimes, as Dr. Keeley had the picture of, you could see the uterus, fist size. It should be practically your fist size, unless something else is going on with it. But the uterus is like a muscle. So when he mentions about a woman's menstrual cycle, it actually contracts like a muscle, and it pushes everything out that needs to come out. Only thing I need to mention, sometimes as the womb weakens for whatever reason, it could be emotional reasons, the reason why it's weak, or after a baby and it has to come back into place, it does not push out sometimes all of that needs to come out in any particular cycle. So women who are going through that, what I recommend are yoni steams. And simply what that is, some people call them hydrotherapy.
Yes.
So it's medicinal herbs that I choose for whatever a woman is going through. Like I said before, not every woman is the same, but we make a specialized blend for you. And then we put it with steam, and that steam comes up and it goes into the vagina, also into the uterus and the rectum. That gets in there and it helps the muscles, pardon me, it helps the muscles regenerate themselves based on the herbs that are used. The other thing, of course, is good for uterus. The only other thing I know that exercises that muscles is orgasms. Dr. Keela can correct me if there's any other way to actually vibrate it and actually have it to exercise and do its thing. Diet is very, very, very important. A lot of us try to get around diet, and it's a huge, huge mistake.
Yes.
It's just like if you were running a marathon, you would do whatever you needed to do to take care of your muscles. You would hydrate, you would make sure that
Right.
you exercise, you would make sure that you did your stretches, everything that you needed to do to make sure your muscles were in top optimum health in order for them to do their job, which is to handle you through this marathon. Same thing with the uterus. You have to prepare it. You have to strengthen it because it is a muscle. It won't just stay strong without you doing anything
That's right.
with it, just like a muscle in your leg or in your arm. So when we talk about detoxing, those are some of the other ways that we detox the uterus and the vagina.
Yes, ma'am. And we've had a lot of questions about fibroids, brothers and sisters. Fibroids are very, very common. And statistically, again, we got to be careful with these statistics, but they say that Black women have fibroids more than anybody else. And my experience is that women develop fibroids for a lot of different reasons, but the ones that I've seen the most associated with are high meat diets. And then if you all get a chance, check out the show that I did on the estrogen assault, because there are so many different things out here in our environments: food, plastic, environment, chemtrails, water, public water, so many different things that are altering women's estrogen levels. And fibroids have been associated with that. So yes, it is a problem. Yes, there are a lot of Black women that are losing their uteri, I'm sorry, that's the correct word, uteri, because of fibroids. And the reality is that I know there were a couple of questions about what you could have done. I mean, there are a lot of things that you can do to help fibroids. I've seen plenty of women shrink fibroids with taking meat out of their diet and taking a lot of these hormonal things and fasting and improving their diet. And then, of course, as Sister Alice said, to think correctly and think from a perspective of healing. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad tells us that we have to have good thoughts. You can do all the right things, but if you don't have good thoughts, you're not going to get the application. So that's what Sister Allison is talking about, that mental health, spiritual aspect of knowing what your womb represents, I think is a large part of a woman having that improve. And so, many of you that are having those type of questions about having a fibroid in the past or losing your uterus, again, if it's gone, there's nothing you can do about it. But the other thing I think that's important to look at this picture of the uterus that we have up is to understand that there are a lot of different things that are being considered when the person says a hysterectomy, right? So a hysterectomy can be a partial hysterectomy or a total hysterectomy. If they do a total hysterectomy, they usually take out everything here. They take out the cervix and the uterus. They take it all out as one, and then they take the fallopian tubes and the ovaries. All of this would be gone. But if you've had a partial hysterectomy, sometimes they will just take your ovaries. Sometimes in a partial hysterectomy, you can lose some of your uterus, and they will keep some of it depending on, like I have literally had some women that have had fibroids that were so big when they tried to take them out, they had to take, like, let's say, like all of this area of the muscle, and then they take this and suture this down to this part so that the woman still has a cervix and part of her uterus. But, you know, the silly thing that a lot of these doctors are telling women is that since we're in you, we need to go ahead and take your ovaries so you won't have to worry about ovarian cancer. What a foolish idea.
Right.
And I'm not talking about the woman is foolish. I'm talking about the doctor giving a woman that foolish idea. Anytime you have a doctor that talks like that, that doctor is not putting God first. They're putting themselves first. And so that's, again, another reason, as we started with, about staying in control. If you know that you are a spiritual person and you know the importance of your spirituality, if you are in the room of a doctor and you see no spirituality, you should leave.
That's right.
Because the possibility of something that's going to happen that's going to be a detriment to you and a benefit to his or her pocket is high. Very important to stay in control in that way. When a doctor says something that you don't agree with, you don't work for him. He or she is supposed to be your servant. So continue to think that way anytime you're in any healthcare practitioner's office. You are the topic. You are the center of attention. And that's one of the ways that you can help keep yourself in control, and don't let anybody make a decision out of some barbaric reality that's going to fill their pocket and end you with a bunch of sorrowful and hurtful days. But again, if you've been through that, let's keep our mind focused on the good and the things that we can do in the future to continue to have the best health that you possibly can have.
Mm-hmm. And just to add to that, Dr. Akili, we have to understand this is a strange way of being for us.
That's right.
This is not our way. We have adopted their way because we've been here for so long, but this is not our way. Most of our ancestors in ancient history, they asked the body what it needed.
That's right.
They just communicated with the body. They asked the body, what is it that you need? And then they would go out and they would find the plant that was necessary that the body needed. But how many of us do that? A lot of times your body will tell you, let's say if you're craving chocolate, okay, well, maybe it really wants magnesium. Maybe you need potassium. But we have to get back into being as close to nature as possible.
That's right.
And stop listening to these people who are clearly trying to kill us.
Yes. And that is so true because, you know, as you all always hear me say, this book right here, this 2-part series is about the mantra that Imhotep taught the world, the Black physician that taught everybody else medicine. Let thy food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. And so when we go into food, this is the solution. And then, as my sister says, we add herbs and we add other things in nature that we know assist the body and what it needs to do. So we've had some wonderful questions. I'm going to let you take this one because it was specifically you, Sister Allison. Can you see the questions?
I cannot. No.
Okay. So Maxine Bland asks a very good question. She says, Sister Allison, please share your thoughts on how womb care may assist or can it assist with the return of the menstrual cycle for women who no longer have it at a younger age? I think that's a pretty good question right there.
How to return the menstrual cycle?
She says, please share your thoughts on how womb care may assist or can it assist with the return of a menstrual cycle?
It actually absolutely can. It's kind of what I brought up earlier about communicating with the cells in the body and asking the body to do different things. We have womb massage. I teach womb massage with my clients.
That's right.
And that's stimulating, getting blood back into that particular area, getting back in the harmonic flow. Because as you know, foods, the environment, not drinking clean water. Those are the types of things that take us out of rhythm and make our bodies alter its normal way of being. So absolutely womb care. But again, I have to do that per woman. Like I do consultations first. I can't give a cookie cutter
That's right.
for all women, but we would deal with food. We would deal with energy practices. And then I would show her how to do proper womb massage. Actually, you're supposed to say womb stimulation because massage is a feel. And if you're not a massage therapist, you're not supposed to use the term massage. So we call it womb stimulation. But you absolutely can do that with the proper food and exercises.
Yeah, there's another. Y'all are asking such great questions this evening. Somebody posted on here. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said we are actually. Let me just say, Kali Muhammad says the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said we would be able to grow uterus back if they had been removed. I agree.
Yes.
And we've also heard the minister talk about the healing that can go on the wheel, right? And like I said previously, somebody asked me about whether or not I thought a person that has a transplanted organ can get off of taking immune suppressant drugs and other medications that typically those people are on. I actually have grown. The man that you sit and listen to today has grown to a place where he doesn't think anything is impossible. It's just that the environment that we live in and the ability, the diligence, and the dedication that a person will put towards a program is usually going to limit what capability you have. And I read this book called The Conquest of Death. It's no longer available. It's a very old book. And while I'm on that, Brother Danny, I need my book back. But this doctor from America went all around the world to find old people. That was his mission. And there are many different stories in this book, but one specifically was a woman in India who was a date farmer. So she worked for the date farm owners. And during the time of year when dates were in abundance, the workers would get a certain amount of dates. And during the time when the dates were out of season, she went on fast because there was nothing for her to eat. And so when this doctor met this woman, he said she looked like an American woman of 40 years of age. But through an interpreter, found out that she was 180. And one of the times when the dates were out of season, she went on a 90-day fast and had a third set of teeth come in her mouth. Mm-hmm. So, I heard the minister mention something like that. He said, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad says something about having a third set of teeth. So there are capabilities of these bodies way beyond what we have experienced. Just like most of us have not seen a 150-year-old person. So how would you know what a 150-year-old person can do if they're healthy? How many of us have seen a 200, 250, 300-year-old person? We read scriptures that say that they were old. Do we believe that they can be that old? And if a person can be 300, they wouldn't wear down these teeth? Have they worn down their fingers? Have they worn down anything else? So we have to start thinking outside of the limitations that have been put on us in this society. And we might see a bunch of things happen if we work hard enough and have a plan to see many, many more years. Ain't that right, Sister Allison?
That's right. That's right. And the key to all of that you were speaking of is getting back into the rhythm and flow of the Creator.
That's right.
Because within that, all things are possible.
That's right. So I think we're going to move on, everybody. We've had a lot of discussion on the uterus and the other issues that are associated with it. We want to talk a little bit about some intangibles, or maybe a correct way to make sure that everybody understands what we're talking about some of the non-traditional things that should be considered when a woman is going to be screened by a physician. So, Sister, I'm just going to start with a short story, and then I'm going to let you take it from there, okay?
Okay.
I actually had a woman that was a patient of mine for many years. She had brought, of course, herself first, her daughters, and a lot of her grandchildren to me. And then 1 year after she had been my patient for about 7-8 years, she came in my office one day and she started the conversation with how much she trusted me. and that she felt like I had treated her children correctly, treated her grandchildren right, and I never did take advantage of anybody. I was thankful for all that, but she was setting me up to tell me some information that she had never said to anybody before. And that was that her father had molested her as a child, starting at about 4 or 5 years old until she was about 12. Her mother wasn't her advocate. None of her aunts were her advocate. And she had kept this to herself for, I think that day that she came, she was like in her late 50s. She had never told anybody. And she said that she felt like a whole weight was lifted off of her by being able to have that discussion with me. And of course, I have always kept that near and dear, never said anything in public about her name or anything. I tell the story because she told me I could, but I have never released her information because that was sacred. But why am I bringing that up? Because we have so many of our Black women as girls and young women that are mistreated or that have been raped or have been, as if it's different, date raped or any of these type of things. And these are the type of things that we as the community are going to have to open up and have conversations with. And that's why I wanted my students to come on here this evening, because I wanted you to interact with this conversation, but I also wanted you all to hear this part, which I think is very important. Every woman that I've ever had the blessing of being a part of her healing from rape or molestation, every single one of them had the voice. Every single one of them got that notion. And we're talking about that women's intuition that something was wrong. Something was going to go wrong. Something just didn't feel right about this situation. They didn't listen to it and something happened. So we really have to, again, this is a spiritual reality we're talking about, because a lot of us get that notion, okay, I should go left. And then you disagree with that and do what you want to do. Sometimes we're being guided and we reject that guidance. And it's very important for us as physicians to be able to be sometimes just the listener, just to be the post that people can relieve some of that information on, but also have the type of care, concern, and the empathy, because we don't know what it is to go through that. Maybe like, I don't know what a woman went through, but have the empathy to be able to allow her a place where she can come and be safe and express that, and there'll be no repercussion for her expression. So go ahead and let's talk about that, Sister Allison.
Wow. I want to start off with it definitely plays a huge part when you talk about womb health. I would even venture to say most of these wombs that are being taken out or have had chemo, fibroid, cysts, have had some type of abuse in their life.
Yes.
And that is where they carried it in the womb. Prime example, I had a client to come in, and this was a young lady's first time seeing me. And as I was doing a Reiki session on her and some womb work, she mentioned that she had gone to the doctor and they saw like a little cyst or something on her cervix. And as we talked, I said to her, oh, I said, well, don't worry, I'm not picking up that it's cancerous. And then I started to ask her, well, what was she sad about? And so she kind of, leaned back in her chair and she's like, what do you mean? Because she never disclosed any of what I'm about to say. And it had to do with her relationship. She was not happy in her relationship. And it was some verbal abuse going on, and she was very sad. And I said to her, I was like, really, there's no need for them to be tearing a part of your cervix off. I said, you can go in if you like, but what I'm seeing is your cervix is actually sad. And I told her, I said, when I look at it, it actually looks like a teardrop. Remember, I'm not a doctor. I wasn't looking at her physical cervix. I was looking at her spiritual cervix.
Yes.
And that is the picture that it showed me. Sure enough, she came back about a month later and she was like, wow, I just want to let you know, I got my test results back. It's benign. There's nothing wrong with it. And the doctor made the comment, it's like, wow, it kind of looked like a teardrop. When they took it off of the cervix, it kind of looked like a teardrop. So we dealt with the spiritual and emotional aspect of what she was going through as a woman, and we had to deal with her relationship, and she had to make some courageous decisions on
Yeah.
what it is that she was going to do about that relationship. So that's an example of how what you're going through as a woman can definitely affect that part. Cervicitis, any type of itis, it's inflammation, that's anger, that's stuff that you have to deal with. Something is happening that you're not really dealing with, and it's showing up in your womb. And I have no doubt in my mind that when you don't handle those things, they turn into cancer. They turn into hysterectomies. They turn into the doctor having to take that part out because you just don't have the information that's necessary to make you empowered enough to make a decision that's best for you and your body in the way that you live your life. I hope I answered that. Is that uh,
I thought that was a good answer.
okay?
So whoever answered the question, let us know. Did we answer your question? We got a couple of other questions. Let's go ahead and do these. There are a lot of questions about the uterus. I guess we need to deal with that a little farther. Thoughts on Kegel exercises, and another question is, what about menopause and hot flashes? Just real quickly, I'll say I think Kegel exercises are excellent. Just like Sister Allison said a few minutes ago, just like you exercise your arms, your legs, and other parts of your body, Kegel exercises are good for exercising the pelvic region. And then as far as menopause and hot flashes, sisters, look, there are other ethnicities and other cultures around the world that don't even know what menopause and hot flashes are.
Right.
They don't know anything about it. So the American diet is something that you have to get away from. If you are the type of person that has hot flashes, now, if you've had surgeries, it could be a different reason. But if you have all of your organs still in you and you're going through hot flashes and you having a lot of different changes in your cycles and all that, you probably have a lot of work to do in your lifestyle as far as how you prepare your foods and what you eat and things of that nature. And of course, there are some spiritual aspects, but a lot of it could be just your diet. The other thing that I will also say from women that I have met personally and discussed, the first person I ever heard say that was a woman that was from, God, it would slip my mind that quick, wouldn't it? Manila. She was from Manila, and she said when I met her, she was in her 80s. And she told me that when she was in her 70s, she was still having regular cycles. And then she just started skipping months. So instead of having a cycle every month, she started having cycles like 6 times a year. And then the next year, she may have a cycle once every 3 months. And then it got to a point where her cycle started getting really, really small. There wasn't much bleeding at all, maybe one pad for a couple of days. And then she stopped having no pain, no difficulty, no PMS and all those type of things that so many people are talking about and doctors are trying to give you pills for. So there definitely is something to the just physical aspect of having your body in a rhythm, like How to Eat to Live talks about, eating at the same time every day, eating simple foods, preparing them in the correct way, eating the foods that are easily digested and not overburdening your body with digestion, eating and eating all this nutrients. They do burden the body. So what you think, sis?
Oh, absolutely. You said that perfectly. Perfectly. Only thing I would add to that is the thought process and really allow people to see just how important your thought process is. When I mean thought process, do you think properly? What is it that you're thinking about? What is the vibration of the thought that you're thinking about? So, for example, if I tell you right now, okay, imagine seeing an orange, right? Now imagine biting an orange.
Right.
Right? If you can do that, most of you had that feeling right back here that you get when you bite into an orange, right? Your body responded even
Yeah.
though there was no orange, right?
Right.
So my body just altered itself chemically from the thought of an orange, even though I didn't even eat the orange. So that's what I mean about your thought process.
That's
You have
right.
to be careful on whatever it is that you're thinking throughout the day. When it comes to menopause, it's just like menopause. Right before you go into menopause, women have experienced, okay, it's there, it's not there, it's there a little bit, then it's gone. Those are the hormones fluctuating back and forth, right? Trying to find this particular rhythm.
That's right.
Our mind is like that a lot. And so as we go throughout our day, our weeks, our months, our mind is constantly fluctuating back and forth based on the stimuli that's in the environment. And so it's all about us training our minds and our bodies because, like I said, we're in a strange place in a strange land. We knew back in the day how to control our bodies. We told our bodies what to do.
That's right.
And even in the study of me becoming a womb practitioner, you study other cultures, the women actually put themselves on a cycle. They could think, okay, I want to have a baby now. And the body would obey and they would have a baby. So, okay, now I will have a cycle. I have a cycle in preparation for a baby. We have to get back to that.
Yeah. That's powerful. That's in line, sisters and brothers. What I always talk about is that we are, a lot of us are experiencing these little things that are really examples of what we have the capabilities of, right? You think of a person, they call you on the phone. You think of a person, they pull up at your house or walk in your door. Those are realities that we can practice and actually do because we desire to do them. So we all have to start thinking much, much more of ourselves. Denise Jones said, they tried it with me and my fibroids. I refused every option they presented to me. No, I did my own research and I am good. No surgery here. Beautiful point, Denise Jones. You just gave a good example of what we talked about staying in control. So everybody, please keep that in the forefront of your mind when you're dealing with this medical system in America and probably all over the world in a lot of places, but some places they are better. But staying in control is definitely something you got to do. So here's one for you. Sister Donna Muhammad says, what are some natural methods to decrease the discomfort of a pelvic prolapse? Good question.
Well, one thing is to correct it. So, and I know we're on quarantine right now, but a part of my training is to do womb placement, I will put the womb back in its proper place and then teach a woman different exercises to do to strengthen those organs in that pelvic floor to keep it up in its correct place. Um, Also, yoni steams have helped women because what it is it relaxes the body, it takes away the tension of the body. Based on your emotions, you've experienced sexual trauma in a relationship. So think about this. You're somewhere you don't want to be. The body is tense. The womb, the uterus is tense, and things go out of alignment. Uh, Spinal column, you need to see the chiropractor. The hips even go
Yeah.
out of alignment because of the ligaments are so tight, and so we smooth out those ligaments, we stretch them, put the womb back in place, and then put you on a regimen to keep the womb in place.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yes, and that brings up a really good another question. I mean, I should say a statement by Denise Jones. She says, that's why I always hated that saying, what happens in this house stays in this house. If you live in right, why say that? That's a beautiful point because we're going to transition this talk after one other question into our last subject for today, which was self-esteem in young girls. The point that I made it, I think it was Saturday night, either Saturday night or Sunday night, we had some guests at the house and there were children there. And we were having a conversation at the table about some spiritual things. And the children were sitting on the couch and they were kind of playing with each other. And I asked them to just be quiet for a minute and listen to the conversation. And then after we finished, I told them why. I said, when I was coming up, 2 of the children were 9 and 1 was 8. I said, when I was coming up, when I was 8 or 9 years old, I was never allowed in a room when adults were talking. Right. And the reality is that the adults were talking about things that they shouldn't have been talking about. Otherwise, we should have been okay. And that's what I try to do is anytime adults are having conversations when I'm around, I like for children to be there. They can learn lessons that they won't have to go through some hardship themselves. And so we should have that type of environment where we are growing our children and supporting our children, and they can hear some things that wisdom may keep them from having to go through this or that in their life, and they can overcome it because they learn some things when they got a chance to listen to some adult conversation. So I would like for you to touch on that, sister. And then Danielle Muhammad asked about a bicornuate uterus. Can you touch on that in your answer?
By a what now? I'm sorry.
Bicornuate, the ones that have seem like they have two sections to it. Let me see if I can pull a picture up.
Okay. So I'll start with the esteem. That's a very good point that you made about children being able to have conversations with the adults. What I've known most of all, and I've mentored a lot of girls all over everywhere, and 2 things that I noticed. One is the lack of education. The things that they thought about the body and how it worked was almost comical, which means nobody was teaching them about their body and actually how it works and what happens. So education is huge. You have to think about when I'm mentoring young girls, I have to tell them, you have a young girl whose body is forming and you have hormones that are starting to kick in. So you have a body that's forming, you have hormones that are kicking in, suggesting to the mind certain things about this particular body. And of course, it's powerful. It has to be if it's getting all of this attention from men, and even women would comment on the formation, if you will, of a female body. But no conversation is being had. Nobody is talking about what's actually happening with this body. For the most part, this is where shame is actually introduced. For something as normal as forming a female body, shame is introduced. And shame is introduced most of the time from the women, the mothers who have had something to happen to them. And so we continue this cycle of, hiding. This thing is shameful. You don't talk about it.
That's right.
Which is why girls fall into this thing when they are abused. They don't talk about it because people are saying this is something you don't talk about. This is something that is hidden. But the best thing that we can give our girls is education on what it is that is happening with their bodies and empower them over their own bodies.
Yes. So there's bicornuate. Do you want to make a comment on that one?
The only thing that I would make on this, because I have not worked with it. So the only thing that I would say is I'll bring it back to the mind and how the body can adjust to anything. You can tell the body what to do and it will do exactly what you would want it to do. So think of it like this. When you eat a particular food, you talk about this all the time, Dr. Keeley, with endocrine disruptors, right? So different foods introduce different things into the body. So a person will have too much estrogen, not enough estrogen, too much testosterone, anything. So whatever needs to happen for you to balance that situation, to have it do whatever it is that you need it to do, that's what I would offer to that. If you mentioned something of a medical standpoint, something else may come to mind, Dr. Keeley.
Yeah, well, I really don't have a lot of experience with that. I mean, we learned about it in school. It's pretty rare. I haven't seen a lot of cases. I think in my career, I've seen one person, and she was having problems getting pregnant. That's really the only thing. She didn't really stay with me long because she wasn't interested in doing the dietary thing. She didn't think dietary had anything to do with it. So she really didn't stay in my practice long. So I don't really have a lot of experience with it. So it would be just speculation or me guessing. So I don't have much to add. I apologize to the person, I forgot who it was, that asked about the bicornuate. But maybe I'll do some research and get back to you.
Yeah.
I want to reach out just a second and talk. I see Kali Muhammad is doing a lot of saying a lot of things about the hormones. I just want to mention that I talked about this in a previous show. I just don't remember which one of it is, but of course, our pineal gland is very important. A lot of people call that the third eye, right? It has a lot to do with sleep and producing the positive things that happen with our brain and how it repairs itself and renews itself and gets itself organized at night when we sleep. But the pineal gland is also involved with a lot of these things we're talking about, the spiritual connection and the ability to be able to connect with things in what a lot of people don't think are real ways. The pineal gland has been studied to be a part of that because they have studied people and taken that pineal gland out, and some of the things that person was able to do goes away.
Yeah.
So that's the major, just kind of what we would call the spiritual center, right? And then you have your hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is probably good to say is the overall regulator of the entire body because it's the part in the brain. It sits in the midbrain, and it really is just basically monitoring the whole body. Every aspect of the body is keeping in control and telling what needs to go here, what needs to go there, and when you're sleepy, when you're full, when you need to go to the bathroom, when you need more water. It's the overall thing. And then the pituitary gland is being controlled by the hypothalamus. When the hypothalamus says, okay, we need more LH because we have to increase the female hormones, or if I need to increase this fight or flight system, the hypothalamus is detecting everything and then telling the pituitary what to send into the body for it to do what it needs to do. So there are some, I see you've been doing a lot of, mentioning about those things. So I just wanted to put that out there that those different systems are always a checks and balances. So when we're talking about the spiritual connection, this human body is so perfectly organized. This system that we're talking about right now, when you have an ovary that is working correctly, when you have a uterus and all the other hormones in the body that work together and in conjunction with each other, just like that car I was talking about earlier, there's a feedback mechanism that's happening. For whatever reason, if the ovary is producing estrogen, the estrogen is going back to the brain. Okay, we're making enough estrogen. At the time of the month when that changes and the progesterone overtakes the estrogen, that progesterone, once it's made from the ovary, goes back to the brain and says, okay, I made enough. And that's how the body continuously, second by second, minute by minute, day by day, hour by hour, year by year, makes its adjustments for all the different things that we're going through. And that's why it makes so much sense when Sister Allison puts this together, because again, we are in a foreign land, foreign mind state with a foreign diet, and we really don't know ourselves. And once we start to learn these things and we start to go in the right direction, the capabilities of our body and the abilities to heal, to function, to be able to take care of the things that we need to do becomes much greater.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else you'd like to add to that, sister?
Absolutely. One thing I wanted to say something about this food thing, and out of the supreme wisdom here, and the only part that I wanted to bring out, Master Farad Muhammad is talking about his uncle, being in this strange land. Yes. But he talks about the devil, right? So he says he likes the devil because the devil gives him nothing. Why does he like the devil? Because the devil put fear in him when he was a little boy. Why does he fear now since he is a big man? because the devil taught him to eat the wrong food. Then it asks, does that have anything to do with the above question number 10? Yes, sir. That makes it other than his own self. What is his own self? His own self is a righteous Muslim. So if the God took the time to actually give this as a directive about eating the wrong foods. And so we've been talking about it this whole time, spiritual food, mental food, and physical food. If this man came to make us into gods, and he did, he gave us an outline of how to do that.
That's right.
I mean, it was a simple outline. So you hear people say, okay, there was no manual that came with this body. I don't know how to. There definitely was and has been a manual that has been given to us on how to manage the body, and not just manage the body, because remember, we're spiritual beings using a body.
That's
We're
right.
not the body, but actually how to be God over the body. And like you, Dr. Keeley, most of my clients that come, I have fibroid clients because I have a program, Fibroids No More. Huge, biggest thing is food. Hardest thing for most people is
Yes.
the food. They
Right.
don't want to change their diet, but it's absolutely necessary. Why? Because we have not learned how to speak to ourselves and have them to do different things outside of food. There's a book, I absolutely love it, Masters of the Far East, the life and teachings of the Masters of the Far East.
Yes.
And so I like it because it's a common occurrence, more so in the Eastern lands. You had people who just being out in the air, in the sun, the body was nourished off of that and could last a very long time before it had to consume any type of food. It would actually absorb. We have water in the air. That's why the rain comes back down. It can't leave out of the Earth's atmosphere.
That's right.
So there's moisture in the air, but we don't know how to retrieve it because we live around strange people and we've adopted our ways. So, I mean, that if I cannot stress anything, if you could just get that, you really are the master of this body. And the more in tune we are with the creator who created the body, you'll know exactly what to do for it. Because you'll ask it. You'll ask it, what is it that you need?
That's right.
So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important to get this book, y'all, because once we start to read How to Eat to Live and we start to practice how to eat to live, it will make you so much more aware of the scientific nature of going against what we're supposed to be eating.
Yes.
Chips and the chocolate. You know, we talked joking earlier about the chocolate, but the chocolate that most women are doing, you know, for these things that we kind of laugh about, it's not real chocolate. Right. And we're talking about eating meat, and we're talking about eating foods that we should never consider food, right? If you have to put junk in front of a food, I don't know anybody that would put junk gas in their car, wouldn't put junk oil in your car. So, you know, we really have to understand that we have scientists. These people have thought and practiced and investigated and experimented with a lot of the things that we are involved with that make us fall off of our deen. And so we really have to practice and get back to that strength.
When you talk about the womb, and we're actually, this isn't this show, but the first thing I mentioned as a spiritual empowerment coach, the womb is actually a portal, Dr. Keeley, is actually a portal into spiritual enlightenment in what they call other realms or into higher knowledge. But before we can get there, you have to detox the womb. And in order for you to do that, you have to eat the right foods. You have to deal with emotional and spiritual and physical trauma. You can't get around it.
That's right. Okay, so we're going to have to get to closing this show, y'all, even though I see that a lot of you all are really enjoying it. So Sister Danielle Muhammad said, I have a bicornuate uterus and had 3 successful pregnancies. Praise be to Allah.
Oh,
That's beautiful. Like I said, I'm not going to sit here and try to act like I know a lot about it, but you're going to put that tick in the ear to go learn something new. Michelle Smalls, you say, if you enter into menopause, can it be reversed? I believe absolutely it can be reversed if you caused it with your lifestyle habits. If you are a big meat eater, if you don't know enough about the estrogen assault to kind of deter that estrogen assault, you may, well, let me use it like this. The experience and the research that I've done, there are people around the world that, like I say, have no idea what menopause is. A lot of them have no idea what acne is. A lot of them have no idea what a painful menstrual cycle is. They really don't. I have researched and read some things where women have continued having cycles and continue having babies in the 80 and 90 years old in some other countries. And, they stopped having cycles when they were 120, 115. So those are some of the examples. So if a woman, and we know that a woman has a capability to have babies a lot longer than we consider in this country, because we consider in this country a woman being on the verge of being too late when she's in her late 30s, which is ridiculous. That thought process automatically takes God out the picture. Mm-hmm. But the point that I'm getting to is that if you eat a lot of meat and your shampoo you never have evaluated, your lotion you've never evaluated, you put plastic bottles in the freezer and in the microwave, and you microwave a lot of food, you eat a lot of stuff out of styrofoam, you eat a lot of fast food, you potentially changing your life could get your cycle back if those are the things that cause you to go into your cycle earlier. But if it was just a natural progression and you have developed menopause because your body has gotten to the end of its productive period, then I would doubt that you could come back for that. And those, we could go in depth in both of those subjects, but the point that I'm getting to, if it's a natural process because of the physical ability to have babies ends, then there is no coming back, because that's when the body goes into menopause in a natural perspective. But a lot of times we've done things to push it in those directions. So if we haven't done that, then there's a potential to come back from that. Anything you want to add to that?
I'm glad you brought that up as far as the thinking. And this is something that we did. So when you think about the cells, and we talked about communication, and all of the cells have information in them. How many of us, and this dianetically, Dr. Akili, how many women, when you got a cycle, was like, oh, I don't want a cycle. Oh, I hate this cycle. Oh, I just want it to go away. And then finally you go into menopause and you're like, wait, no, I want the cycle.
Yeah.
But the message you put out there was already, okay, yeah. I don't like this. I don't want this. Now, we didn't get into contraceptions, but all of that is information.
Yes.
And the womb stores the information that it's been given. That because it can also work in the reverse. When you're no longer want to have a baby, I wouldn't call it menopause, but you can absolutely tell the body, I'm not interested in that. You can shut that part off. And it will do exactly that. So we have to be careful of our thought process and things that we think about ourselves as women and the process of the womb and having a cycle. All of that has to do with what the body gives us back as far as cramps, as far as headaches. Because what do you actually think about yourself? How do you feel about being a woman? We have to look at all of that.
Yeah. So, brothers and sisters, I really appreciate everybody for staying and being so interactive tonight. We've had a wonderful conversation with some very thought-provoking questions. I think we're going to have to end it with these two. Ann Taylor says, oophorectomy, what dangers lie within one? And Michelle Small says, how can I learn about the reversal process? I think she's talking about, well, actually, tell me what you're talking about, Michelle Smalls, if you're still on. Please explain to me what you mean by how can I learn about the reversal process. I was assuming you were talking about menopause, but I don't want to assume. So can you talk about that oophorectomy, what dangers lie within?
I'm actually not familiar with that.
Okay. So the word oophorectomy is just a medical term that we use for taking out a woman's ovary.
Oh,
And I would say the biggest danger that lies within that, my sister, is that, as I mentioned earlier, the biggest number of deaths that occur in medical centers every day, every year, are the mistakes that doctors make. And I have seen a multitude of them because no two women have I ever seen that were just alike. No two women that I've ever seen were their ovaries in the same place. No two women that I have ever seen were the ovaries exactly just alike. There's a difference to every human body that I've ever seen from the inside or however we take a look at a person. And so the first danger that lies in that procedure is that a mistake could happen and some blood vessel or some muscle or some other organ is damaged because of this surgeon trying to be fast or
hmm,
not necessarily having true concern and care, just doing whatever it does to get it done or doing it in whatever way it takes to get done, not concerned about how much damage and what you push and what you pushing up against and what you pulling apart. So that would be my biggest concern. The second one would be just the whole conversation that we've had today is that once
right,
your ovaries are taken out, you are missing something in your body that was never supposed to be taken out.
right,
Again, that's not to put you down and that's not for anybody to feel bad. You have to do the best you have. You have to do the best you can with what you have now and be thankful to the God that we serve that you still are as whole as you are to be able to manifest whatever it is that you have left to manifest, because a lot of women don't make it out of these surgeries. So there's
right.
always something to be thankful for. But those would be the two points that I would make. And I thought that was a very good question.
And
And
let's look at it. I don't know if she's saying she's already had it or not, but let's look at what's actually going on first before, if it's not too far gone, before you even look at surgery.
absolutely. I'm sorry. Say it one more time. I was looking at some of these questions. You said before surgery.
No, I
What?
was just saying, I didn't know whether she had already had it or
Oh,
not,
right,
but
right.
I would suggest, like, I do consultations. So I was saying, let's look at what's really going on. Where are you in the process? Is it something that can be healed or reversed before we look at taking anything out?
Yeah. Um, So you all see her information scrolling down there. Make sure you get in touch with her. And if there's anything that I can help or if we need to work with you together, let us know. I think this is a pretty interesting statement right here. Dr. Africa wrote menstruation was not natural for women on holistic diets. I don't know if I can agree with that at all because the menstrual cycle is actually a perfect part of the process of the womb and its health. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, let
And
me just,
that is
a
no disrespect intended to Dr. Africa. Just scientists sometimes look at what each other say and we can disagree, we can agree, we can decide to do more work. I'm just telling you from my research, my understanding, I would not agree with that statement.
in my studies, it would indicate that having a menstrual cycle is normal and a part of the rhythm of the woman. However, what we think of menstrual cycle is actually hemorrhaging. Most women hemorrhage. They
Yes,
don't have a menstrual cycle. It
yes,
is entirely too heavy. And we bleed for when you're having 6, 7+ days of bleeding is absolutely too much. So most times when people say menstrual cycle, that's what they mean. And that's absolutely not actually what's happening. It's more of a hemorrhage. And that can be fixed as well, mainly with diet
yes, ma'am.
and making sure that the womb is in the correct place as well, because that can make a woman bleed a little bit more than she should.
Yes. And Shayna Hayes Poe says, I got my tubes tied after 6 pregnancies, 4 live births. I want to untie my tubes for my current marriage. I definitely know there are some doctors out there that will do that for you, sister, at 42 years young. You may just have to reach out to me personally. I'll put my information on the banner now as well. And we may have to help you get some information on somebody that can help you in the right way, because we definitely don't want you to wind up in the wrong hands. But if that's your desire in your current marriage is to have more children, then you should definitely have that thought processes in your mind, and you should be able to make that happen. Okay, so I think that's it, my sister. We've had a wonderful show. Tonight's show was, I think, very necessary, and it's obvious because there is a lot of interaction and a lot of people that have actually said that they enjoyed the show. And what we're going to do, Sister Allison and I have some plans that we're working on already to do some things around the country. We're trying to start it in Atlanta. The coronavirus kind of put that on hold. And so we will be working on things once this is over. We're going to do some programs like this and move around the country. And we may even have to consider doing it remotely at this point, since this was such a wonderful show. And I think it's such a wonderful subject for our people to consider, to start having conversations. And as some of you have agreed to and said, that we need to start having these conversations with our young women, our young sisters, and the young sisters that are on here that are my medical students. I am going to bring them back, and we're going to have a similar conversation with the youth. So you all look out for that. Sister Allison, anything you want to say to close out?
Just that anybody wants to have a consultation, want to talk to me a little bit more, you can go on my site that's scrolling down at the bottom and schedule a consultation. If you have any girl, any girl, I would strongly recommend my book. And I'm not just saying it just because I wrote it. It really is a therapeutic tool for young women to really process what's going on with their lives. And they don't fall into this thing of only being associated with the womb when they're pregnant or they're having some type of problem. They'll actually get used to having a real communication with their womb and be empowered on exactly what the womb is and how to handle that. So there's my book, A Diary for My Daughters. You can go on my website and get it. It's also on Amazon, but there's another cover there. If you see the other one on Amazon, which is the other book, this one has been totally redone, revised. This is the one that you want. So you can either get it on Amazon or you can go on my site, AllisonMuhammad.com, and purchase it there.
Okay, so again, I think we had a wonderful show. Brother Samuel X. Clark, thank you for that, brother. You came back and said the same thing that she said about the hemorrhage in Dr. Lalo Africa. So I'm glad we were able to, have that dialogue and not have any disagreement. I have said before that when it comes to where Brother Dr. Akili is today, I stand on the back of Lalo Africa. I stand on the back of Dr. Sabi. I stand on the back of Dr. Alim Muhammad. And so all the three of those men, as well as Sister Afua, have taught me a lot about health, and they took me to another place until I got to that book right there. And it took me on a whole nother stratosphere. But I always like to make sure that people understand that as scientists, we don't always see things the same. We don't always say things the same way. But as you can see tonight, we do agree. It just was said in a way that we have to get to that agreement, right? So I thank you very much, sister. It was a wonderful show. Your wisdom is even more impressive than the first conversation. Brothers and sisters, the reason why I knew I had to have this sister is the first time we had a conversation was at Savior's Day, and we were talking about, women's health, and we knew that we were going to come together and do some things after our first conversation. But, it was to a whole nother level tonight. Sister Allison got me on like another universe of information about how important our women's health is. And so again, putting this all back in context, we want to make sure that every sister, please, if you think this and last week's show was something that women should hear, that's something that women should take in consideration, please share the show with people specifically, or just share the show from your site and let people know about it. And you all let us know If there are, other things that you would like for us to talk about, Sister Allison, doesn't have to be the last time she comes on. We could always do some more. We could deal with maybe one subject if you all have many questions. But that's what we're here for, is to serve you all. But again, putting things back in context, stay in control, sisters. Specifically, we're talking to you today. You have to stay in control. And I think when you listen to today's show and you listen to last week's show, when it comes to a woman, when you enter a doctor's office, a urgent care center, any type of physician's office, any type of medical facility with any type of healthcare practitioner, make sure you are as educated as you think you need to be to make the good decision, to ask the right questions, and most importantly, to always stay in control and make sure that you are sure that the decision that you're making is the best decision, and that you aren't tricked, and that you aren't making it out of fear, because it's always your decision and it's always your right to control what it is that God blessed you in this skin that you contain. Okay. So I thank you all again for coming, spending your time. I thank the soldiers that continue to come back and make these shows so wonderful with your support and your questions. And as always, pray that you got some news that you can use today. And remember that hard work is what it takes to have good health in this society that we live in. So please work hard on your health so that you will get everything that your blood, sweat, and tear produces. So we thank you again for tuning in on the Ultimate Wellness Group Transformation Tuesday. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and we'll see you again next week. Peace.